There was a time when cars didn't just take us from point A to point B, they had personality. You'd swing open a little vent window for a bit of breeze, sink into velour seats that made the ride feel extra cozy, and that wood paneling gave even a plain wagon a little style. Just a few of the features that made cars back then so memorable. Buckle up, and let's look back at the details that made those cars unforgettable. Back when front seats were just one long bench, riding up front felt a lot more open. There was room for couples to sit close on date nights, or for the whole family to sit side by side, just enjoying the ride together. 3 across in the front was just normal, and if you had to slide the seat forward, it took a little teamwork. Both people had to move at once, or that seat wasn't going anywhere. For kids, sitting in the middle meant being right in the action, next to the radio, next to the driver, and able to see everything out the windshield. In the late 1980s and early 90s, some compact cars came with automatic shoulder belts. When you closed the door, the belt would glide along a track and pull itself into place across your chest. But it didn't fasten the lap belt. That still had to be done by hand. And let's be honest, it was easy to forget, especially if you were in a rush. They were meant to feel modern, but they'd often dig into your neck and somehow always seemed to be in the way. Most drivers were glad to see them go once airbags became standard. Those small triangular windows found on the front doors, known as vent windows, were a common feature in cars from the 50s through the 80s. They let fresh air in without the need to roll down the main window, perfect for directing airflow or venting cigarette smoke. Many of us would sometimes slip a coin under the crank to stop the window from rattling or whistling on the highway. Though simple, vent windows added a bit of comfort on long drives, offering fresh air in an era before modern climate control systems. Velour seats were a staple in many cars throughout the 70s and 80s. Soft, warm, and just a bit plush, they felt like your favorite living room chair. In winter, they were a much more comfortable option than cold leather, but they held on to more than just warmth. If someone smoked in the car, that smell stayed with the seats. And watching this now, you must remember that smell. And of course, those little burn holes from dropped ashes. Some seats looked like they'd been through a fireworks show. They didn't always hold up over the years, but back then, velour made any car feel just a little more upscale. If you grew up with cars from the 60s through the 90s, you definitely remember the built-in ashtrays and those cigarette lighters with the glowing red coil. Almost every one of us touched that thing at least once, just to see if it was hot, and regretted it immediately.
Honey, careful, that's a cigarette lighter.
No, I don't think they had those then.
Yes, they did.
Ow!
Oh, honey!
The state of the ashtray said a lot about the person driving the car. If the ashtray was spotless, you knew better than to eat, bring a drink, or toss anything in there. But if it was already full of ashes and crumbs, anything goes. And even for non-smokers, ashtrays had a second life. Plenty of people used them to hold loose change, fuses, or even parking tokens. Vinyl Landau roofs were once seen as a symbol of style and luxury. Designed to mimic the look of a convertible, they gave cars a formal, upscale appearance without the need for a folding top. Models like the Ford LTD and Pontiac Bonneville featured them prominently, often paired with chrome trim and small opera windows. But the vinyl didn't hold up well over time. It cracked, peeled, and trapped moisture. Replacing it wasn't cheap either. By the 1990s, the trend had faded. For a time, having a Landau roof gave your car a touch of elegance that stood out. In the 70s and 80s, wood paneling wasn't just for furniture or walls. It found its way onto cars too. That faux wood trim stretched across the sides of station wagons, minivans, and early SUVs, giving everyday vehicles a bit of style. Some thought it looked classy, others weren't so sure. But if you grew up riding in one of those wagons, you remember it well, especially sitting in the rear-facing seats, talking with your siblings, legs swinging as the world rolled by. That look became part of the memory, something you still picture when you think of family road trips. In the 70s and 80s, CB radios were everywhere. They weren't just for truckers. Almost everyone had one, or knew someone who did. You could find folks chatting any time of day, 24/7. It was a way to stay connected, pass the time, or even strike up a conversation with someone new.
Breaker 19, Breaker 19. This is Pete.
I'm Nick.
And Julie.
Cobra, Midland, and Realistic from our beloved Radio Shack were some of the go-to brands, and some cars even came with CB radios straight from the factory. Everyone had a handle, a nickname, and chances are you still remember yours. Drop it in the comments if you do. They were the cell phones of their time, and sometimes the start of a conversation you never expected. Pop-up headlights were one of those little details that made a car feel special. When the sun went down and the lights came on, it was like the car came to life. They showed up on everything from the Honda Prelude to the Toyota Celica, and even on sleek sports cars like the Corvette and the Mazda RX-7. They weren't just functional, they had personality, and every kid in the back seat waited for that moment when the headlights popped up like the car was saying hello. Sure, they eventually disappeared in favor of aerodynamics and safety rules, but for those who remember, they'll always be one of the coolest little features a car could have. There was a time when cars came with more than one key. The square one was for the ignition, the round one for the doors, and sometimes there was even a third for the gas cap. You didn't just hop in and drive. First, you unlocked the driver's side, then leaned across the seat to open the door for your passenger. Modern cars don't work that way anymore, but some of us still drive with those old keys. And there's something about that small ritual that brings back a familiar feeling you don't get with today's key fobs. Life felt pretty great when your car had a player built right in. First came the 8-tracks, big, clunky, but magical. You'd slide in a Supertramp tape, and suddenly the highway felt like your own personal concert. Then came cassette players, and everything changed. You could record your own mixtapes at home and take them on the road. It wasn't just music, it was your mood, your style, your story, all packed into that little plastic case. And sure, the tape might get eaten once in a while, but back then, rewinding it with a pencil was just part of the fun. There was a time when having a car phone meant you'd really made it. Mounted right on the console or armrest, it looked like something out of a spy movie. Big, heavy, and full of buttons. The reception wasn't great and the rates were sky high, but just being able to make a call from your car felt futuristic. Funny enough, they even sold imitation antennas you could stick on your roof, just to look like you had one. It was a mix of real convenience and a little showmanship, perfect for that moment in time. This is why so many of us still say, roll the window down, even when there's no roller anymore. Today's kids get confused when they don't see a button, and half the time, they have no idea what that little handle is even for. Back in the day, manual window cranks were in just about every car. Simple, reliable, and they worked even when the battery didn't. You could still open the window on a hot day, no matter what. Power antennas were a slick feature back in the day. Turn on the radio and the antenna rose up from the fender with a soft electric hum. But as cool as they looked, they didn't always cooperate. On freezing mornings, they'd often get stuck halfway, or refuse to come up at all. And when they stopped working, you were left with weak reception, or whatever the antenna could catch in place. Still, seeing it slide up and down with the radio felt like something special at the time. It wasn't exactly a car feature, but back then, paper maps felt like part of the vehicle itself. Before GPS, they were essential, always tucked in the glove box behind the visor, or stuffed in the door. No trip started without someone unfolding one across their lap, pointing out cities, highways, and turns as the car rolled along. You might stop at a gas station just to figure out where you were. Maybe it wasn't the most convenient option, especially when you tried folding it back up the right way, but it was the only way to get from point A to point B. I'd love to hear in the comments which of these car features you remember, or maybe still have in your own vehicle. Thanks for watching and for sticking with me through all these memories. I'll see you in the next one.